Hey guys, I'm going to walk through the 3 assembly tutorials in the Onshape Learning Center in this video. If you missed my instructions video, that's posted in today's folder in Schoology, so just make sure you go and watch that so you fully understand some of the details on setting up the tutorial in Onshape and that sort of thing. So let's go ahead and jump in here. So in today's folder, I'm in the assembly tutorial part 1. I'm going to click on this link. It's going to take me over to the Onshape Learning Center. As I mentioned in the last video, make sure you're logged into Onshape first, so that way when you go into drop your models in, that you're in myips.onshape.com and not the cad.onshape.com. Also, sorry about the noise, there's a guy cutting bricks just behind the wall here, so it'd be like that sometimes. Okay, I'm going to skip the instructions, but you definitely should not. These videos are very useful for your understanding of assemblies, but in this video I'm just really showing how to make the parts. So the first one that we're going to make is this part right here, which is the universal joint part. So I'm going to go ahead and start the tutorial. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to click on this link to open Onshape's version of the public document. Now this is it's a read-only document, so if we really want to edit it, which is what we're doing, then we want to make a copy of this. So I'm just going to rename the back end of this iAtoms, just removing the copy part, putting my name on it. So that will open my own version of the document. So this is the universal joint part. I am in a Part Studio tab. So if we go back to the instructions and we go to the next step, you'll see that it's asking us to create an assembly. We're going to do that by going down to the bottom left corner of our screen, clicking the plus button, and going to Create Assembly. Now, when we open the assembly for the first time, you'll see that our assembly environment is completely blank. There's nothing there, which is why the next step is for us to insert the part from the menu. So I'm going to go to Insert, click on my part, the universal joint assembly, and after it thinks about it for a minute, you can see that there's my part. So I'm just going to click to place it, and then I will click the green check to accept. I don't really know why it's moving around like crazy like that. If you don't get the option to insert, then you might be in the Part Studio tab still, so just make sure you go over to the Assembly tab. Now, this part is in the assembly, but it doesn't have any relationship identified. It's just kind of there. It doesn't have a position or coordinates, or it's not fixed or anything. You can see I can just drag it around in 3D space. So part of today's tutorial is learning how to make something fixed and have a very specific place that it lives. So let's go to the next step. The next step is a little bit confusing, so I want to make sure that you pay attention carefully here. So it says that we're selecting the part to display the triad manipulator. Then drag and drop the triad to the shown mate connector point. Alright, so let's start with the triad manipulator, which is really fancy sounding. If we click on our part, and I'm just clicking on this middle section here, you can see I get these 3 arrows that show up on my screen. That is the triad manipulator. It's called the triad manipulator because it's got 3 arrows. So what it wants us to do is it wants us to click the center of this and move it until the triad manipulator snaps to the center of this rectangular shape here. So you can see if I'm moving it around here and I'm getting some snap happening, I want it to snap right there, just like that. So your arrow should be pointed straight up from the center of this universal joint part, just like that. That's what they're asking for us to do. I thought that was a little confusing, but whatever. Okay, step 5 says that we are going to move the part to the origin so that the triad position of the part aligns to the origin. Then we're going to right-click the center circle and choose Move to Origin. Alright, so we're going to right-click on the circle part of our triad manipulator, and the very top option there should be Move to Origin. Now when you do this, your part might move out of view if you were dragging yours around wildly like I was, but you can see now that my part is now aligned to the origin. Mine's actually upside down right now, but we can fix that. It's not a big deal. Alright, so the next thing that we're going to do, step 6, says that we are going to reorient the part so that it is facing upwards. So we need to right click on the arrow of the triad manipulator that is normal to the selected face and choose Align with Z. So that's a lot of words. So we're going to choose this arrow and we're going to right click on it to make it align with Z. And what happened is now my triad manipulator in the center here. Now my triad manipulator in the center here is pointed straight up. Triad manipulator, why do you do this? Okay. We'll just get that guy back there. That's cool. There we go. Got him back. So now I'm going to re-click and align with Z. Now it's flipped. You can see my arrow is still pointed straight up. Okay. Next step. And this is the last step for this object, is that we are going to click on the object, the item, and right click on the item and select Fix. So we don't need that manipulator anymore. I'm going to right click on the item and I'm going to select the option in the menu for Fix. Now what this does is it locks this item in place. You can see now that when I try to drag it, I get that no sign on my cursor, and I get this little symbol down here which means that it's fixed in place. So this part can no longer move. That's the first tutorial. Alright, let's move on to the next one. So that was Insert a Part. Exercise 2 is Mating Parts. This one's a little bit more complicated. Alright, so we are going to open the public document that is called Exercise Clamp. I'm going to close all this other stuff here. Again, this is a view-only document, so we need to make a copy. So I'll click the copy button and rename this to Exercise Clamp I. Adams. Okay, so in this document we have two part studios. We've got one that's got this clamp body part here, and then we've got the handle. We also have an assembly tab that is completely empty. So let's go to step 2. Step 2 says that we're going to navigate to the assembly tab and we're going to rename this clamp assembly. So I'm going to right click on assembly 1 down here and I'm going to rename this clamp assembly. Alright, step 3 is that we're going to insert the parts into the clamp's part studio, and we need to make sure we put them all in there. So we're going to go to Insert. Here we have two different part studios, so I'm going to bring the whole part studio in and then the other part studio in. And I'm going to click the green check. Now, as a warning, right now there aren't any relationships applied to this. So you can see that I can just freely separate all of these parts. And that's okay, because we're going to fix that. But just know that that's because there aren't any mates applied yet. Okay. Whoops. So now we're going to use the triad manipulator to move the rod so that the center of the front face aligns to the assembly origin. So we are going to make sure that we fix this guy, the center of it, to the origin. Let's do that real quick. So we're going to go to this. I'm going to click on the part. I'm going to click on the center of my triad manipulator and I'm going to drag it until it snaps to the center there. And then I'm going to move this to the origin. And mine by default snapped to the front view, so I'm not going to change anything else about my clamp. So I'm going to leave it just like that. Alright. Oh, we forgot one step. So now I need to right click on this part and I need to fix it in place. So now it is aligned to the origin, and if you look over in the part menu here, you can see that rod is fixed in place. Okay, next step is that we are going to use a fastened mate to connect the left end of the rod. So if you've been paying attention to the tutorials, then you know that this is the fastened mate symbol up here. So we're going to be using this to connect the inside of this piece right here. Be careful which face you click, because you can actually apply it to the inside or the outside edge of this face if you're not careful. We want to apply it to the very bottom of that hole, so I'm going to click right here. You can see that it's selected that inner face instead of the outer face here. So we want to mate that to the left side of the bar. So I'm just using my mouse to orbit around and select a face. And sometimes Onshape struggles a little bit with this when it's doing the preview, but here it seems like everything looks okay. So I'm going to click the green checkbox, and then I'm going to go to the next step, which is to use a sliding mate. So it says to allow the sliding clamp to slide along a rod, create the slider mate between the end of the cut of the sliding clamp and the free end of the rod. So look at the face that we're selecting here. It's the outside face, not the inner face, and it is on the outside edge on the right side if it was connected. And then we're going to mate it to the very end of the rod. Okay, so here is the piece that we are working with. Again, we're choosing this outer edge, so that's going to be this guy right here. So I'm going to select the slider mate from the menu, and I'm going to place it on this outside face, and then again on this bar piece here. Now we can test this by pressing the animate button. We can see that that does in fact work, but we need to make some changes because that's not the direction that the clamp is supposed to move. So let's go to the next step, or we'll scroll down here in the instructions, and it says the mate connector should be centered in the cut. If needed, hold the shift key to lock the blah blah blah. Apply a limit allowing the sliding clamp to move 7.5 inches to the left of the rod. Alright, so we need to check the limit option in the slider mate menu, and we are going to set the maximum to 7.5. So let's see what that looks like now. It looks like that's going the opposite direction of what we want it to do. So I'm going to actually change this to negative 7.5 and put the maximum to 0. So if we test this now, you can see now that my bar clamp moves in the correct direction. So we can click the green checkbox. Now we can move this guy back and forth along the clamp to make sure that it moves exactly the way that it's supposed to. Next step. So it says that we're going to insert, oh, we already did that. These parts are already there. So I'm going to skip step 7. We're going to do a fastened mate between the handle and the threaded shaft, which is this blue metal part. Make sure that you apply the fastened mate to the inside of the handle. So I'm going to start with this guy here. I'm going to use the fastened mate.
Times at this time, all have lunch students are invited to the cafeteria for lunch. Please be sure to have your IDs visible ready to show upon entry.
We'll just wait for this to be done. Remember that time I tried to make a recording? Good times. Anyway, we are going to apply a fastened mate to this side and then the inside of the handle here. Again, if it's sticking out too far, then you probably didn't fasten it to the correct face. So I'm going to click the green checkbox on this to accept that. So now this guy is fastened. Now, it's fastened, but it's not constrained to anything. So you can see I can still freely move this around. There's nothing stopping it from moving. We'll fix that in a second. Okay. So now we're going to put what's called a ball mate between the end of the threaded shaft, the blue part, and the stopper. So let's go in and apply that mate. So this is the ball mate in the menu. We are going to come over to this shape right here. Click on this guy. It's going to select the whole shape, and then we're going to apply that to the inside of this. I'll go ahead and accept that. So you can see, well, hold on a second. I'll go ahead and press animate here so you can see how that works. You can see that it animates a little bit, it's a little bit derpy because it forgets that it is fastened to that other part, but you can see that that is in fact the correct motion. Okay, So how do we fix it so that this no longer moves the way it does and so that this ball piece moves correctly? Well, we need to connect it to the rest of the clamp. So let's go to step 10. So it says that we are going to mate the threaded shaft to the sliding clamp so that they slide and rotate with a cylindrical mate. Be sure that the set hole is towards the front of the assembly. In the visual here, you can see that we are selecting the outer edge of this face. That's on the thicker part of the blue piece here. And then we're selecting the outside edge of the right part of the clamp. So cylindrical mate is what we are looking for, which in the menu has the two different directions of motion. So we are going to apply that cylindrical mate to this face, and then to this face. And you can see that it left these two parts here. It didn't actually do that. It's just simulating these two parts and forgetting the rest of the relationships. But you can see here we can slide this, and you can immediately see that this is backwards of what it's supposed to be. So we can just switch these two parts and do it in the opposite order. Although I'm going to undo that first, so that this guy's back here. So I'm going to go to cylindrical mate. This time I will pick this face first, and then come out here and select this face next. So now I get the correct direction of movement. In the instructions, it says that we want to add a limit so that the threaded shaft can only slide 3 inches towards the left of the rod. So I'll check the limit box, and we'll put the Z maximum to 3 inches. And then we'll play that to see how that works. We can put all our parts together here to see if that does what it's supposed to do. And oh god, it does not. So we need to fix that. Let's step back. Looks like it's moving in the wrong direction. We want our clamp to move backwards, not forwards. So we'll set the minimum to -3 and the maximum to 0 and see if that moves in the correct direction this time. And you can see that it does. See how it hits there and then it goes back the other direction? That's what we want. Alright, so now I should be able to move this bar clamp down here, and then I should also be able to move this shaft separately so that both pieces move. So you can see that I can move this back and forth, and it moves along the threads there, and then I can also move this piece. You can see that as this shaft moves, that we get the rotation of the threads as well. So everything looks good there, and we can move into the last part, which is part 3. Now this one's using the universal joint one more time, so let's go ahead and jump into this guy. We're going to open this exercise file. It's another public document. And again, we're going to make a copy to edit. So I will rename this Exercise Universal Joint Assembly I Atoms. So now I've got my part studio and a sub-assembly. So 2 part studios. So we'll go through here and create an assembly tab. This time they didn't make one for us. So we'll create an assembly. It wants us to rename that assembly Universal Joint Assembly. Alright. Step 3 is that we're going to drop in the universal joint flange, which is the first part, that orangish yellow thing. So we'll drop this guy in and accept. And we want to fix it in place. And it doesn't say anything about aligning it to the origin, so we won't do that, but we will just fix it in place. Let's just put it right there. Sure. So we'll fix that guy there. Step 5 is that we're going to insert the other parts. It says insert the 3 parts from the Universal Joint Components Part Studio. So we're going to go back to the Insert menu, and we're going to click on the Part Studio. Now if you click on this drop-down menu, you'll see that each of the 3 parts is listed there separately. We want to drop in the whole Part Studio, which is all 3 parts. You can see that because if I move this, you can see each of the parts separately. Okay. Next slide. So now we are going to start applying some mates. So we want to put in a revolute mate. It says mate the universal joint center block, which is this piece right here. We're going to mate that with the universal joint with a revolute. It says use the explicit mate connectors already established in this part. So there's a mate connection in the middle of this piece, and there's a mate connection in the middle of this piece. And that's what we want to do. Alright, so how does that work? We're going to go to revolute mate. I'm going to select the middle of this part and the middle of this part. You can see I can animate this, and that looks the way that it's supposed to. In the instructions, they want us to put a limit on this of -90 and +90. So we'll go to limit, -90 and 90. We can animate that, and you can see how that works. All right. Notice that the solid part is on top here. That's what we want. So these holes line up on either side. We've got a hole here as well. And then the solid part is on top and bottom. Okay. Next step is we are going to apply a fastened mate to the universal joint axle and the bushing. So on the bushing, we're going to be applying the mate to the outside edge here, this face, and that will also be applied to this kind of tapered edge on the outside of the axle. So it should pretty much look exactly like this once we're done. All right, so let's do that. Oop. Let me get my view right here. Okay, so we're going to do a fastened mate to this inside edge, just to the bottom of that fillet. And then we will also apply that over here to this face as well. And that looks okay. I believe that that's the way that that should look. Just like that. Okay. So we'll accept the mate. Now we will mate the bushing to the center block with a fastened mate. We're applying it to the center of the top edge there, and then to this outer rectangular face on the left side. So I'm going to rotate this way, just triple checking that I'm doing this correct. We want a fastened mate. We're going to put it on this face right here, and then also apply it on the left side face. So here's a trick for you. If you want to make sure that you are applying it to the correct part, you can hold down the Shift key. You can see here that the rectangular shape here is highlighted, and by using the Shift key, I can very carefully select which face I am applying this mate to. So you can see that's what the preview will look like. Again, it leaves the other part behind when it does this. That's totally fine. Click the green check to accept, and then it pops it over. So that looks okay. It's got a little clipping here, which makes me wonder if I select the wrong face. So let me step back a second. We'll try to reapply this mate. I go back to step 7, just to make sure that we are selecting the right face. So it looks like it wants the bottom edge of that fillet. Attaching that to this face right there. Now we'll do that mate one more time over here for step 8. We want to make sure that this fits correctly. So that needs to be on this, like that. Okay. So you can see I can still rotate this guy just fine. Let's go to the next step. So it says, let's restructure the assembly and move the axle and the bushing to a sub-assembly. So we're going to select the 2 points, the 2 parts there on the left side, and we will move them to a sub-assembly. So over here we're going to select both of these, and I just held down the shift button to do that. And we're going to right click and click on Move to New Sub-Assembly. And you can see that it opened a new part studio here with these parts. I think I clicked the wrong one. I sure did, so let me do that again. I'm doing great. Whoops, I need to... Oh no. Well, I need to do some redoing here. Give me 1 sec. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. I accidentally deleted an assembly and I lost everything, but it's okay. So, make sure that when you are selecting these items that you select the right ones. So it says that we're selecting the graphite, phosphor, bronze, blah blah blah, and the universal joint axle. So I'm going to go over here, I'm going to hold down shift to select both of these. You can see that this is the correct part this time. I'm going to right click and we will move to a new subassembly. Alright, so now I have an assembly over here, which is the subassembly, and we are going to rename that assembly Universal Joint Axle Subassembly. So rename Universal Joint Axle Subassembly. That's a lot of words. Okay, so now we have that tab there, and so it says notice both selected instances and the mate between them move and in the new assembly tab. So it means they're both stuck together. So then we're using the triad manipulator to reposition and reorient the axle as shown. So we want it to be anti-aligned to the z-axis. So I'm going to move this guy back here, get to this guy oriented that way just like we did before, and just move to the center circle here. Right click to move to origin, and then we are going to anti-align this guy to Z so that it's sticking straight up. Okay, now we're going to fix it in place. Now, no matter which part I click on, they're both fixed. Okay, next step. We're going to go back to the main assembly and we are going to use the replicate feature to instance the new subassembly. So go back to our first thing here, and the replicate option is in the menu. It's this little drop down symbol here, so we're going to look for that guy, and it is this Lego piece looking symbol up here. So we are going to select that, and we are going to select the subassembly as the instance to replicate, and here is the universal joint axle subassembly. So we're going to replicate that, and then it says that it wants us to select a face to find the match in. So select the subassembly, and then the faces are going to be these other 3 square edges of the silver block. So we'll just go through. First we got to click on the red box. We'll select our face here. There's a face. There's a face. And there's a face. Then we will click accept to place that. So now we have this guy here, which can rotate that away. Okay, move along. We're going to drop in another universal joint. We can right click on the instance to make a copy. Or, we could just drop it in from the menu, which is what I'm going to do. Okay. So now we are going to apply a revolute mate, and we are going to select this center part of the other universal joint, the new one, and then we will also select the center of the block, centering it so it can rotate. We're going to use the explicit mate connectors that are already established, which are the ones in the middle, and then we're going to add limits. The important thing here is that we want to make sure that we align this so that these guys are actually at a 90-degree angle to each other. So you can see that this bottom joint here is facing forward, and the other one on top is turned sideways. So let's go ahead and do that. Revolute mate this guy to the center of this. And you can see that it's just sticking it in where it was before. We can use the flip primary axis here to rotate. That's still not right, so we need to click on reorient secondary axis to get the correct direction. So now you can see that I can rotate it so that it is, whoops, it's still not right. Let's see. Let's try that again. Move this guy over here. Gotta delete my revolute. Move this guy back out of the way. We want to revolute. This.
Good afternoon, Tech Guys. Feel that everyone has regarding dating, teaching, and work. It is now time for your afternoon.
Okay, so it took me a minute to remember how to do this. So what you need to do is in the revolute mate menu, set an offset, the z-axis, to rotate about the x 90 degrees. And that's how we get it so that they are 90 degrees to each other like that. We're going to put in a limit of negative 90 to positive 90, and then our joint is finished. You can see that we can rotate it in both directions there. Alright, so once you're done with this, you'll screenshot this guy and submit it to today's box, and you are all set to go. Good luck. Let me know if you need any help.